Hi, folks. This is Keith.
This is Andy. Welcome to Brockton Bay.
Welcome back to the Brockton Bay Chronicles, reviewing Worm by Wildbow. This is episode 6, part 2. Andy, where will we be picking up from today?
We'll be finishing Arc 6, Tangle, chapters 7 through 9, and the interlude.
And we're not going to be doing any reviews at this point, so let's just jump right into our point by point. We pick up Arc 6, Chapter 7, with the Undersiders having made their daring escape from the Forestburg Gallery. They're riding the dogs, leaping from rooftop to rooftop, heading on down toward the street level, where they deal with an unconscious Tattletale.
Yeah, it's been rough on everybody, but Tattletale definitely got pummeled pretty good, and she's still down for the count. Bitch is having trouble keeping her on the dog, and so they put down in the alley near the parking garage and allow her to slide off, and Gru and Skitter are there to keep her from cracking her head on the pavement. I thought it was interesting that in the midst of this, Skitter feels some regret that she couldn't snuggle closer to Gru on their flight through the city. So typical teenage response, our lives are in danger and I'm on the back of a giant mutant dog flying up above the city streets. But man, I wish I could get closer to this guy. He's really cute.
Never mind the fact I just had this knockdown drag out with this superhero, and I set a gazillion hornets on his face. But I just like this to be just a little closer to Gru. But I mean, she just got through acknowledging to herself though that this was probably going to be her last time out with the Undersider. So at this moment, you can't really blame her for feeling a little nostalgic as far as that goes.
That's a really good point.
I do like the fact that when they were dealing with Tattletale trying to bring her back to consciousness, and she actually had smelling salts, which was something that Gru lamented them not having earlier on a couple of arcs ago. And Regent gives her kind of a hard time about actually having some. And she had said, hey, Gru had said something about we should have some. And Regent replied, I bet half of us did. The weird thing is that you actually followed through, Dork. And I'm beginning to get the idea that Dork is his pet name for her. Kind of I think I see a brother-sister relationship kind of developing with them.
I could see that. I had thought about it that way, but yeah, there's definitely that kind of little sister
sibling needling and then teasing back and forth.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from on that. I was kind of surprised that she had that as well, but then I thought about it, and she is kind of the quote unquote utility belt type person of the group and looking to make sure she has whatever might be needed, and adding different things. And after she had thought about it, when Tattletale said, if she needed anything, she wanted the baton and the knife, and those have both come in handy. So, Regent definitely seems like things kind of come to him as an afterthought half the time, but Skitter is definitely more proactive. And if something is brought up as a good ad, then I'm not surprised that she jumped on that.
Yeah. So they managed to bring Tattletale to consciousness, and she almost immediately realizes that they haven't quite escaped danger. Everyone kind of relaxes and thinks for half a second that they actually had made it safely out of the area, only to find out that Armsmaster and Dauntless were right on their tail, and they were now facing off against them. I believe they were at either end of the alley that the Undersiders were in.
That's correct. And this is one of those classic moments when the plan is laid out. The plan doesn't necessarily stay in place once battle is joined. Folks make a decision on the fly that seems very valid. We don't want to risk leading people back to our getaway vehicles, so let's stop here and check. But then Tattletale had in mind all along that they needed to end up at the parking garage because something was going to happen there.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I think it says she managed to fit more invective into one word than some people from my dad's work could manage in 10. And so she's very unhappy.
Yeah,
say,
that they stopped short of it didn't get to the garage.
Right. And so, yeah, just when they thought they could lick their wounds a little bit and, kind of stretch out the kinks, here's Armsmaster and Dauntless, and things aren't looking so good again.
What do you think about Dauntless?
He's scary, impressive.
Mm-hmm.
If it sounds like each day he's a little stronger. So if they had met him a week later, this might not have gone very well.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting twist on the powers that somebody would. I guess we saw it a little bit with Lung in that as the battle continued, he got stronger.
Mm-hmm.
But to think of somebody gaining strength daily and eventually probably supplanting everybody else at the top of the pyramid, that would be unnerving, I think, for everybody on the Protectorate side. Hard to see where that's going to go, but is Dauntless going to get bored and just fly off to some other planet at some point or whatever? But it's pretty neat, and yeah, they're definitely not out of the fire yet.
Yeah, and Tattletale, again, initially not knowing that he's wearing earplugs, Tattletale tries to get inside Dauntless's head and try to point out that how resentful Armsmaster is of Dauntless because he is the next big thing. Taylor was thinking and relaying to us in the text about how one day the word was that Dauntless could even rival the members of the Triumvirate, Alexandria, Legend, and Eidolon, the very top dogs of the Protectorate. So one day this hometown hero was going to be a big shot.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that assessment from Taylor. If, it keeps increasing every day, who knows what the limit is and if there is one. And none of the other powers that are on the scene can claim this. They're all, they've all pretty much discovered what their strengths are. We have seen where the younger ones are kind of exploring maybe the limits of some of their stuff, but this guy seems like he could definitely be the equivalent of Zeus or Odin, at the top of the pantheon.
Yeah. And so we end up with Tattletale whispering to the squad, hey, we've got to go. Let's get to the parking garage. That's where we need to be. And the team manages to beat a hasty retreat thanks to Regent, who uses his power to, after getting shocked by Dauntless's shield, he's like, forget this mess. And he trips up Dauntless, and the team manages to scoot by him and make their way to the parking garage.
Yeah, and I think that's Regent in a nutshell, being reactive. It's not until he's like, ow, that really hurt. Fine, forget it. I'm done. It's like, couldn't you have made him trip as soon as he showed up? Why did it have to get to the point where you looked like you guys were in trouble?
Yeah.
But that's Regent for you.
How about Dauntless's arc lance? Pretty cool sounding weapon.
Well, all of his stuff is cool. I mean, we didn't really get to see what the boots did, but the shield that he can create and the way it not only dispels the darkness and the smoke, if you will, from Gru, but also is shocking to the touch, and who knows what other properties it has. I guess we find out here in a little bit, but it's all very impressive. Yeah. And then he starts flinging the lance around, and it's not really like throwing it. I don't know how to describe it. It just grows instantaneously to whatever length he wants it to, or whatever the limit of the length is.
Mm-hmm. So the squad makes it to the parking garage, and then we see this absolutely brutal takedown of Dauntless and Armsmaster. But before we actually go into the details of that, I don't want to ignore how good a fighter Armsmaster actually sounds like. I mean, yeah, he's a jerk. He's self-centered, and he and Dauntless are outnumbered in this fight. But I mean, he does put up a good fight till they get overwhelmed.
That's a great point. And I think not only as just a tactician, but also as a strategist. Skitter had mentioned, hey, I thought I threw your halberd away. And he demonstrates that it's like this super boomerang that'll just, or, the hammer of Thor will just return to him.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, he planned all this stuff out. He planned out the earplugs for Dauntless. And so, yeah, he's pretty amazing. And against the firepower that he goes up against, it's amazing. After being stung like mad, he's able to keep up as long as he does in the fight with the bigger group at the parking garage.
Thanks for that reminder. Let's talk briefly before we do go back to the parking garage in depth. Let's talk about the fine detail, the fine control that Skitter has on her insects. She comments about how she made the hornets bite and sting, but sting without injecting poison from their sacs, the poison sacs, or just a small amount. Referring back to how bloodied and swollen Arms Master's face is, so the fine control she has over her insects now is pretty impressive.
Definitely, and we've seen that ramp up, kind of each chapter and each arc, where at the beginning it was kind of like, wow, this is a ton of work and I'm not sure how this is going to happen, and I'll just send all these things over there. Then kind of creating human simulacra to cause bombs to go off, and being able to use them almost like radar to be able to sense where things are in the darkness. And then now this, where it's like, okay, sting, but don't sting all the way. And, just keep stinging, but not all.
Yeah.
It's really remarkable, the control she has.
So the Undersiders make it to the garage, and inside the garage are a couple of several other villains: Circus, Trainwreck, Trickster, and Genesis. And thanks to their efforts, I mean, they make pretty quick work of Dauntless and Arms Master, and it was pretty impressive. Trickster teleporting Arms Master from one location, replacing him with a concrete slab. Trainwreck grabbing Arms Master and just repeatedly slamming him into a car. I think I really liked Circus the most. Again, this is another case where during my reread, I actually get what Circus was doing, and that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, and there was somebody else there too, right?
Oh, Ballistic.
Yeah. Is Genesis the one that can do the sun?
Sundancer was there. So Genesis had an octopus crab looking sea creature.
That's right.
That was her projection. And Trickster was there. Ballistic was there. He kept sending cars into Dauntless and bringing down his shield.
Right. Yeah, that's where we see the power of Dauntless's shield, that it can support a car for a small amount of time, but that a weight of a car overwhelms it eventually. So, but that's still really impressive with the shield. And then Sundancer prevented them from leaving by using her sun in an exit. So not particularly impressive from an offensive standpoint, but definitely contained the battle and allowed the others to beat the heck out of these two from the Protectorate.
And Circus, I like how, she could take an object, and I believe Skitter said could deposit it in air. So, and then retrieve it, recall it when she needed to. So she was taking this sledgehammer, and after Ballistic would send a car into Dauntless and drop his shield, Circus came after him with this sledgehammer and didn't have to swing it. She just, it would reappear at the point where she needed it, and she had the momentum, and she kept bringing it down on him and took him down.
That unfortunately kind of gave me a vibe of like the old Bugs Bunny cartoons, especially the one with the gremlin from World War II.
Yes.
Where it would just make things appear in his hand and then do nasty things to Bugs Bunny with them. So I had to keep saying, no, this is a big giant battle with heroes and villains. So let's keep the right vibe in mind here. But it was very impressive.
And after the two heroes are down, from out of the shadows steps Coil. Did that surprise you?
It really did. Yeah, this whole sequence was keeping me off balance because, yeah, the groups were kind of tag teamed together earlier, but that had all seemed to fallen apart. We knew there was, the man behind the curtain or the villain behind the curtain, but we didn't know who that was. And then the tricksters were there, and it was kind of like, or the travelers, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, well, why would they be doing this? And how would Tattletale get them to be there? And I'm glad they're there. And then Coil coming out, it's like the pieces all fell in place kind of, but it was surprising.
So we move on to chapter 8. Coil has a ride arranged for himself, the Undersiders, and for Trickster. They pile Bitch's dogs into a couple of vans, and they head on out to get away from the emergency response and any heroes that might be arriving on the scene. And during the ride, Coil does a quick demonstration of his powers. Thoughts about his powers?
Well, I've got one point I'd like to make before we leave that last scene.
Yeah.
And that was just that they had mentioned that Trickster had been approached by the Undersiders to join. Right? Is it? No, Circus.
Circus. There you go.
And had refused. And so it was kind of, well, all right, what did they do to get her to join in this time? And then Coil must have manipulated something somehow to get her involved. So that was interesting, I thought. But yeah, then they get in the vehicles and depart, and the power was curious. It seemed like Skitter figured out what it was right away. Probability manipulation. That seemed like a good thing. But then Tattletale says, no, that's not exactly it. And so I'm not sure. I mean, he says, I control destinies. I decide outcomes. That almost seems too powerful. I'm not sure how to read that.
Coil does his demonstration, and what he does is he takes a roll of coins, and he flips individual coins at each of the Undersiders, and each of them turns up heads. And Skitter, still not being a full believer in what he has, the power he has, she pulls a coin from out of her change purse, small little change purse that she has, shows it to him, does the same thing, flips it, and it comes up heads. And then she has a debate with, not a debate. She tries to understand what his power is, probability manipulation or something else like that. She is a little irritated at Tattletale because Tattletale wasn't forthcoming. She didn't lie, but she wasn't forthcoming about her knowledge of Coil's power when they had the meeting with all the other villains.
That was classic speaking out of the side of your neck kind of thing. Skitter had asked what his powers were, and Skitter remembers her saying that Tattletale didn't know, and she says, no, I said I couldn't say, which is true because she couldn't say. She was told by Coil not to share information. So yeah, half truth at best.
Yeah. So Coil has a plan. He wants to be the man in Brockton Bay. As I listened to this, Coil doesn't come off as your typical mustache twirling villain, but still, he even admits his plan. He's not wanting to take over the world because that was a bit cliche. And even the idea of taking over the town was cliche, but he wants to control, it sounds like, both the good side, law enforcement, so forth, and the villains.
It is cliche. I'm glad he did admit that. But given his power and kind of the parameters he sets to it, it's not that far fetched. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head, but there are definitely examples in literature of criminals running the town. Oh, I guess a good one, although kind of a stretch, is Silverado, the cowboy movie from back in the 90s, I guess, where the one guy gets offered to be hired as the sheriff, and it turns out that basically it's a town run by a cattle baron or something like that, land baron. And
okay, we had a little bit of a technical hiccup, but hopefully I can stitch this together safely. Andy, go ahead and finish your thought about Silverado and that example.
Sure. Again, the cattle baron or land baron runs the town kind of behind the scenes. His flunkies and bootlicking toadies get to do pretty much whatever they want. So the sheriff doesn't know that, the new sheriff, but is told in no uncertain terms that if certain people do things, even if it's against the law, then he's to look the other way. So Coyle seems to be going for a similar setup to that, where he's wanting to have the mayoral candidate beholding to him, also the city council, and it seems like it would work. And, not to pat myself on the back, but it seems like at one of the earlier episodes, I mentioned that Coyle might end up kind of running things somehow.
Yeah.
So maybe I kind of saw that coming a little bit, but I didn't expect him to be behind the man behind the curtain for the Undersiders.
Yeah, that was definitely a shock the first time I read that too. And he comes prepared to offer things to each of the individuals, including the travelers. Sounds like the travelers have some pretty specific requirements or requests. And Trickster says, hey, if you can meet your obligation to us, we'll be in your little group of warlords.
Yeah, and it harkens back then to that mention that had happened when the different mashed up teams were hanging out, where somebody had mentioned to Skitter that they were having to do all these jobs and raking all this cash, and it was getting tiring going from town to town. Trickster's not happy that was shared, and so Skitter stops talking about it.
Yeah, the travelers have a specific request. Coyle points out that he was going to be helping Gru with his situation with his sister, sounds like. Regent, the situation with Regent, that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I didn't see that one coming at all. But again, that's kind of a common theme where you have a hero or a villain who's trying to get out of the shadow of a parent that doesn't really want anyone to know who that parent is. And then apparently Coyle was able to figure it out. So Regent is thinking that, yeah, okay, that would be good to be more notorious or more famous than my father.
So can we infer that Regent's father is more than likely a parahuman?
Oh, I would definitely agree with that. I can't remember. There was one parahuman that we saw earlier that had a crown. So maybe Regent is related to him, but I can't remember that parahuman's name.
Okay. As far as additional promises or enticements to the group, Coyle mentions Bitch. He approaches her with the idea of assisting her with her desire to take care of the stray dogs and the ones that she's rescued. This, I think, actually might be a pretty good peek at Bitch. Her loyalty isn't just to her three primary animals or to the ones she rescued from the dogfighting ring, it sounds like she's setting up shelters for dogs at large that she comes across, and she's trying her best to care for them. And as part of the recruitment to get her to buy into this, Coyle says, "Hey, I can help you long term make each of these locations more habitable for the dogs that you're rescuing." Indeed, it sounds like he respects what she's trying to do.
Excellent point. Typical bitch response, not believing anything a human would tell her. So she is, I think, definitely intrigued by it, just typically distrustful as she is about anything from people. But I agree, Coyle does respect what she's been trying to do. And I think bitch is just more put off by the fact that he knows so much about what she's been trying to do. And, how from her perspective, that puts all those vulnerable animals at risk, that somebody knows about it. So I think it's probably still going to take her some time to come around to it, but it's definitely the right carrot to hold out.
Skitter tries to see if she can poke holes in Coyle's plans. Coyle relays to the group his assessment of the parahuman teams that are remaining in the city of Brockton Bay. Credibility of the Protectorate is shot. The Wards and the Wards and New Wave. Nobody has real confidence in New Wave for much the reason I think you actually alluded to about them being outside the laws as far as the restrictions like the Protectorate team members are. The merchants are just basically scumbags on a merry looting spree. The Empire and some of the other guys, they're just not. They're not going to be able to stand up to what Coyle's trying to bring to bear.
Yeah, this is a challenge for Skitter. She's at the end of the day just a teenager, and here you have an adult that's been scheming for years, if not maybe a decade or longer. This is Coyle's bread and butter, trying to figure out the angles, figure out controlled destinies, I guess, as he called it, seeing where all the different paths might go. And so he's got all the bases covered. I don't know that even a master strategist would be able to poke holes in his plan at this point.
Agreed. And so he doesn't know what to offer Skitter. And she, in her effort to try to remain convincing to Tattletale, her grand request would be that he make the town work. And she talks about getting the ferry restarted, which is her dad's project. She talks about how she would like for him to try to make the town, the schools better, and give some other examples. I think that's a bit pie in the sky. What do you think about that?
Well, to hark back to that original comment I made about a similarity with the movie Silverado, that city looked great on the surface too. The streets were cleaner. The businesses were seemingly honest. The gambling in the saloon was not, people didn't get shot. From the outside, from somebody passing through or from somebody who didn't look too much under the surface, everything looked great. When things got bad is when the Baron was threatened, when people started looking into what was really going on. And so this will all be fine until somebody does try to move in and make things worse, or the Protectorate, as he says, once they get settled and everything, if they have the right folks involved, then he's going to have to crank up the evil, if you will, and exert his influence more, and that could get unpleasant for everybody. So it's kind of a pick and a poke, if you will. It could be good as long as the status quo is maintained, but the chance of that happening is pretty low. And so once the disruptions start, then he's going to be forced to try to maintain his power, and that's probably not going to be pleasant.
So Skitter realizes during all this discussion, Skitter realizes that this is it. This was the last piece of the puzzle for her. her intentions of going undercover, being there with the Undersiders, sticking around for as long as she had, her desire was to get the boss. Well, guess what, Skitter? Welcome to it. Here's the boss. What's she going to do now?
Great question. And I can't imagine being in Skitter's position. Her skills have improved with this group. Her relationships have gotten better. They just took on something they didn't think they'd be able to handle. And in the end, you could make a case that they didn't handle it, because without Coil's intervention at the end, they probably would have lost to Armsmaster and Dauntless. But nevertheless, they've been doing better and better all the time. And she's got to be enjoying that more and more, and kind of blurring that line between, villain and hero, and maybe making rationalizations that, oh, these folks aren't that villainous.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's kind of like, all right, you got what you wanted. Now what? One thing I would like to harken back to, though, and it didn't occur to me until we were talking about it, when Coil says, I don't know what to give you, the obvious thing that popped into my head was taking care of the bullies. And that reminded me that the Undersiders had kind of offered that, and she had turned them down. And since now we know that Tattletale was talking to Coil all the time, Coil probably already knew that from Tattletale,
right?
That Skitter didn't want the bullies taken care of. And so kind of the wheels within wheels, if you will, Coil probably already had plenty of information about everybody else's predicaments. So I'm sure he knew all about this, and had Tattletale kind of explore that option as the carrot that he could eventually offer. But he already knew that that wasn't something that was going to be enticing. So just occurred to me as we were talking about it.
Sure. And so this leads us on into chapter 9, and we find Taylor on her way home and mentally writing an email to Miss Militia, trying to lay out how Skitter ended up, or Taylor, how Taylor ended up in this position and what her original plan was. She gets home. She gets home and heads into a rather difficult confrontation with her father.
Yeah, that composing the email, as so often happens, as we try to put together an email that's difficult to send or plan out a tough conversation, we start thinking about our feelings on different things and start exploring what different options mean or what different perspectives mean. And Skitter's getting more and more conflicted. Taylor, I should say, is getting more and more conflicted that, yes, this is what I wanted originally, but Coil controlling all these things sounds like a pretty good deal. So do I really want to, and it would mean turning on my friends. I wouldn't have to do that if I went with Coil. And so she's really in a tough spot. And I'm sure the wheels are turning in her head. She's doing all that. And then, yeah, she gets blindsided by her dad coming home. And in hindsight, probably not that much of a blindside. Anytime a parent is faced with a teenager that's kind of seems to be going off the rails,
losing their way.
Yeah, they're going to try to kind of give them a little bit of a wake up call, get them back on track. I'm guessing even more so for a single parent, because it's like, all right, I've got to jump on this right away because I've got nobody to back me up and try to tag team this. So
I don't know how deep you want to get into the specifics of the conversation. I'll kind of leave that to you. One of the questions that I've been wrestling with, going back and forth and rereading this thing, and again, credit to Wildbow challenging me, I felt, as I'm reading this thing. Is Danny wrong here? Or is Taylor avoiding her share of the responsibility for how their relationship has gotten to this point? Superpowers aside, we've only seen Danny's point of view once, but I just feel for him.
Definitely. It's It's tough, and I'm fine going into this as much as you want. I think all teenagers rebel to one extent or another. I can remember getting into it with my parents at different times, even though I'm
Oh,
about
sure.
as, straight arrow as you can get. And so I can't, as I said, it's tough to imagine how much harder it would be for a single parent who had lost their spouse, knew all the stuff that their kid was going through, wanted to give them some leeway, some space, and then seemingly seeing it go sideways in a really bad way. And then not really having a sounding board or a spouse to bounce ideas off of on how to handle it.
Yeah.
It's a super challenging situation for the dad. And I think he definitely could have handled it better, but he had no idea what he was up against. So a normal kid without superpowers and without a team to back them up would probably have just knuckled under, and there would have been a lot of resentment and bitterness for a while, but it probably would have been okay. Threatened to run away kind of thing or whatever. But yeah, he's just walking into this toothpick against a machine gun kind of thing.
And again, another credit to Wildbow for not making Danny just, I think it would have been easy or expected to have Danny be just kind of this bad dad, maybe abusive, maybe he drank or something. And yeah, Taylor has a complete reason to not want to be at home and want to escape. But I'm glad that Wildbow didn't make Danny that dad.
Great point. That would have taken a lot of the personality out of this, a lot of the tension, would have made it seem kind of two-dimensional or predictable, with Danny being forceful about it and saying, look, we've got to talk this out, we're going to stay here until we get some of this talked out. It's definitely given that kind of, oh crap, I'm in trouble now vibe to it, without being overbearing or dictatorial, or I guess it's a little dictatorial, but not abusive, as you said.
As Taylor's trying to deal with this, with her own feelings about how she's conflicted about whether or not she should turn in the Undersiders, about how she feels like she's letting her dad down and she is angry at him. She's also having to deal with, once again, her bugs, her swarm, really acting to her emotional duress and wanting to come flooding in against her will.
She's been kind of combat trained now, and she has developed that ability to the point where there's a much more kind of almost symbiotic relationship with those bugs. And she's gotten a lot of practice just having it at the ready in the back of her mind, or however it works, that she's prepared to face off or prepared to fight back. And she's been in places where she had to battle her way out of, and so that kind of reaction comes to the fore, and it surprises her. And she has to fight against it, as she's had in other situations. But I think her ability to control things better, and the practice she's had, makes her better able to contain things.
Taylor ends up texting Lisa to come get her, and she goes around Danny and goes to leave home to head with Lisa. I'm going to presume back to the loft. Let me ask you this: seeing the situation as it is, how bad is this break? Is this something they can come back to? I mean, father and daughter.
I think so. It's a bad break, but at the end here, Danny is realizing that how he tried his containment field, how he tried to control the situation, has failed. But the reason he did it was he wanted to maintain the relationship with his daughter. He wanted to try to help her make good decisions. And stay on the right track. And so I think even though she finds a way to get around it and to kind of escape, he still loves her. He still wants what's best for her. And he'll try to, hopefully seek counsel on how he could better handle it, how he could try to get a better handle on this situation. But he doesn't want to lose the relationship with his daughter, and Taylor doesn't want to lose the relationship either. It's just that, as she's kind of continued to blur the lines, kind of redraw what's okay. If you think back to the beginning, she was totally stressed out that her project got damaged by the soda dumped on it. And, how am I going to get this fixed in time? How am I going to work out that I get credit? And now here, Danny's telling her, you missed 3 weeks of class. Yeah. You've blown off tons of projects. And that isn't even really entered her mind. She's been busy. She's been doing her thing. So with the blurring of the lines over and over again, I think it's made it easier to get to this point where, you know what, you try to hem me in, I'm just going to find a way out. But at the end of the day, she doesn't want to lose her relationship with her dad either. So I think they can patch it up. It's just
they're in a tough spot.
Yeah. Yeah. And as I said, he didn't realize that she's become that kind of person where it's like, like the old saying from the Hulk, right? Don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry. So she's got to that point where it's like, don't push me.
Yeah.
And he pushes and she's like, fine, I'm going to leave.
We did get a brief look at Taylor's relationship with her mom, real brief, where she recalled a fond memory of a day in her mom's class. Her mom was a professor, and that brought some raw emotions up from Taylor.
Yeah, that was an interesting little flashback, and it definitely plays into that blurring of the lines and how over time we can get comfortable with something if we keep pushing our conscience aside or setting aside any misgivings we have about something, and somebody might need to come up and point something out to us. Taylor's definitely at that moment. Danny handles it in a way that kind of triggers her, but I am convinced that she'll come back around and have kind of the same response that this man did, that her mom mentioned, hey, that comb over looks pretty bad. And she'll realize, all right, yeah, maybe I shouldn't go around cutting the eyes out of people. So, yeah, I'll try to mend my ways.
This whole situation prompts her to accept the fact that she likes the Undersiders and she wants to get to know each of them on an individual basis without any subterfuge. And she finally accepts. I think this really depressed me when she was writing out that letter and said, I am a supervillain. Up to this point, I mean, I was Team Taylor. I went back and I looked at some of the, when I was live texting Tony for our listeners, my stepson, Tony, is the one who got me into Worm. And I got to these various points and I'd send him text. And so a couple of days or so ago, Andy, I went back and looked at some of my text back to him. I was optimistic going into this point. And when I got to here in this break, I was pretty brokenhearted.
Wow. Okay. I didn't take it that way. I see her coming to that realization, but I still hold out hope.
Mm-hmm.
I guess.
So you're a little more optimistic at this moment, sounds like, than I was possibly.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I see that line. I am a supervillain, and I mentally put in parentheses, I am currently parentheses, a supervillain. So I still hold out hope that, the inner core of Taylor is going to, when push comes to shove, she's going to say, you know what? No, this is just wrong. And again, to harken back to Silverado, that guy, signed on as sheriff, and, he did the bidding and everything. But once the cover was pulled back and it was revealed how ugly things were, he rallied the troops, and they turned the tables on the bad guys, and they ran them into the ground. So I'm still holding out hope for that. Maybe I've got too much of a Disney complex. I don't know.
Okay. All right. Well, we will see what happens going forward. So, and now we move on to interlude 6, Canary. And this is where we see the tragic trial of one Paige Maccabee. This poor girl, sounds like she got kind of a raw deal. I think, we do get a look at parahumans and the law. Let's talk about that. What were your impressions of this going in?
I hadn't really thought about it much before, other than from the enforcement standpoint, with the protectorate there, with the bird cage as an ultimate destination for criminals. But obviously the criminal justice system on the court side would have to change too, with the different kind of powers that people have, the different abilities. There's got to be laws around how those are used, what happens if they're abused, and hadn't really paused to consider that at all. But I agree, Paige, ran afoul of the letter of the law,
right?
Kind of got the book thrown at her. So,
and let's remember, I forget the exact number of times parahumans have been around less than a generation. I think it was in the mid 80s when Zion first appeared. Am I remembering that correctly? It's sometime around there. So yes, society is having to evolve, and part of that evolution is, how do you deal with a parahuman who, whether they meant to or not, hurts a non-powered being?
That's definitely the point they're trying to get here. And it's something also that's kind of touched on in like the X-Men series and even the Avengers series, where
yes,
who is able to sit in judgment. Really, you should have, in an ideal world, parahumans kind of judging parahumans, but then you run the risk of everything's run by the parahumans then, right? They, just like in the X-Men, Magneto saying, well, we're evolved from regular humans, so we should be in charge. We should be saying what can be done. And, as inferior as regular Homo sapiens might be, we're not about to let another group just take the keys to the kingdom and do whatever they want. We're still the majority.
Yeah.
So they're going to want to maintain control of things. Now, there's probably been lots of input from folks in the protectorate and people who understand things and that sort of thing. But still, there's going to be, it happens in regular case law where there's circumstances that aren't foreseen, and it ends up being that, well, this is how the law is written, but it's unfair to everybody the way in this particular case. And it seems like that's what's happening here too.
She was not malicious in her intent. First, I guess we need to discuss the fact that she was on trial for 3 crimes. She was convicted of 2 because of her circumstance, because of her particular power. The judge felt that he had no choice other than to send her to the birdcage, which was, as she realized, pretty much a death sentence or a life sentence. You can't get out. You go in, but you can't get out. She ends up finding herself in a prison transport vehicle with 2 of our favorite friends, Lung and Bakuda.
Wow. I would not want to be transported in that vehicle.
No, not a chummy, not exactly a chummy ride. No.
No. And it's like those prison movies where, you've got the person who embezzled or something like that with
Yeah.
a bunch of hardcore violent crime type criminals in the bus going to the joint, repeat offenders or whatever. And except it's even more drastic, the contrast between the groups, Paige and the other two folks.
I do love the actual, stepping back a second. I do love the formal name of the bird cage, the Bauman Parahuman Containment Center. Rather august sounding name for a place that houses the most dangerous parahumans that have been caught, that have run afoul of the law.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. But it's I wasn't surprised. A lot of that's just how administrations are, right? They've got to give everything a big name, but then it always comes up with, a nickname, like The Rock.
Sure.
And so that was pretty cool, though, that it makes it very realistic.
Absolutely. Paige is in this ride. Each of the three of them are in containment foam. Paige has got a mask on that prevents her from using her voice, because her power is her ability. When she sings, she can manipulate. This is another case where where a parahuman can manipulate the emotions or the actions of others. Lung is under a constant drizzle of water, in addition into being in twice as much containment foam as Bakuda.
Yeah, it's interesting how they have things set up here. We find out later that there's all sorts of rules about how that's supposed to be done, which makes sense. It's not just like transporting any other prisoner. But yeah, she starts to find out right away, Paige does, that she's in the vehicle with a couple of hardcore folks who are willing to do anything.
And Bakuda has a plan. She intimidates Paige into giving her access to her mask. The mask is a complex unit and has a tranquilizer that was supposed to inject Paige if she used her voice at all. Bakuda successfully removes that from her, and then fashions a device. Sounds like almost like a flashbang, with the idea of having Paige sing when the guards opened up the door to let them out. Bakuda would toss the bomb, she'd sing, and they would try to make their escape.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I couldn't picture in my mind really well what Bakuda was up to. I thought she was trying to make a lockpick or, something. I remember, she's a tinker, but then it had kind of slipped my mind that by far the main thing she did was bombs. And so finally it dawned on me that, okay, she's repurposing the stuff that she has.
Mm-hmm.
And she's also freeing Paige to use her power, as you said. So then the plan all made sense. But I thought Wildbow did a pretty good job of kind of masking what was going on, or not explicitly saying what was going to happen.
Yes, good point. Yeah, and Paige would drift in and out of sleep, and things would take place at that point, and that's kind of how Wildbow didn't have to explain exactly every detail that Bakuda was doing. She kind of needled Lung quite a bit, trying to get him to use his powers, limited as war, in order to refashion some of the metal that she needed for tools. She went after his ego, called him a couple of names to get him to soften up some of the metal with his heat.
Yeah, I was surprised at how much she was picking on him, knowing what she did know about him. But, at one point in the narrative here, it says Bakuda grinned with a hint of mania to her expression. So it's pointing out that, Bakuda has definitely got a wild streak.
She's back, bro. She's bat crap crazy.
Okay, let's go with that. Yeah, she's doing whatever she needs to do, letting it run as wild as she needs to try to get him out of there. But yeah, I don't know about, you don't want to poke the sleeping bear too much or you're going to get bit.
Yeah. Let's take a quick step back and point out the super bomb that got mentioned in the previous chapter, or the previous several chapters. The super bomb, actually, it wasn't so much the fact that it was a low yield nuclear weapon. It was going to be a powerful EMP, which would have just ruined everybody's day.
Yeah, I didn't see that coming, but the prospect of a 20% of the country losing all tech, basically all high tech, I should say. Yeah, that would just, that would wipe out everything. That would be one of those apocalyptic type things. I don't know that area of the country would recover. Things would just run rampant because, we're focused mostly on the parahumans, but there's plenty of just regular garden variety criminals out there too that would be ecstatic if
sure,
people's cell phones didn't work anymore, video surveillance didn't work anymore, locks sprung on in prisons or whatever. So yeah, that would have been chaos with a capital C.
Yeah. And the van arrives at the birdcage at the receiving center. They try to initiate their great escape plan. The van doors open up. The Pakuda tosses the bomb out there. Canary starts to sing, and it's all for naught because several mechanical hands come in and grab them one at a time. There's not a human to be found in the vicinity.
Right. Pretty amazing the way they have that set up. And, that's always kind of a lingering question in any of those escape from the van type things in any of the movies you see, where it's like, well, why didn't they have this planned out better? Why weren't the guards more prepared? I didn't think of it at the time, but as we're talking through it, they mentioned that Long had escaped from the van a couple of other times, being transported not to the birdcage, but to other locations. And so, I'm guessing that they, once bitten, twice shy kind of thing here. They were trying to make it as escape proof as possible. And it seems like they've succeeded.
And here we meet the person who's been considered the most powerful tinker in the world, Dragon. She designed the bird cage, and she was the one who was going to be using her mechanical implements, going to be transporting the three of them down to their new home.
This is pretty cool. I could really picture it almost like being in some kind of investors meeting and having the presentation up and, the hollow mountain and all the different layers of protection and layers of escape proofing, and very impressive. And yeah, Bakuda and Paige are both kind of taken aback that, wow, this is the dragon. And so that's pretty neat that they get to quote unquote meet her, but very unfortunate circumstances for them.
Yeah, and Dragon makes it clear that she actually felt sorry for Paige. I think that kind of goes back to, touches briefly on the points you were making, that yeah, she ran afoul of the law, but this wasn't necessarily the desired end for Paige Maccabee. Dragon had written letters on her behalf to the DA and the judge saying that the birdcage is the last place Paige needed to be. And actually, Dragon was also a fan of her music, I believe.
I think so. And Dragon goes so far as trying to put her in a safe place and giving her the information she needs to try to keep from running afoul of any of the worst people in the birdcage. So, and it makes sense. I mean, someone who is able to develop and plan out this escape-proof prison would also be able to would see the flaws in the other systems that they were working with, and could see that Paige had fallen into one of these flawed areas of the criminal justice parahuman system.
So we get a little bit of a time skip, and we see Lung, who's now they're inside the bird cage. Lung is walking across the facility and heading to the women's side of the bird cage on his way to visit Bakuda, and he has a specific reason for going to see her.
Yeah, that's that's what you get for poking the bear.
Yeah.
I wish I could say I feel bad for Bakuda, but like you said, she's got her whole otherworldly set of problems, and not going to shed a tear that she's gone. I'm a little surprised at how logical and articulate Lung is about this. We haven't really seen that side of him where he's just like, oh, this is what I got to do. Sorry, here's the explanation.
Mm-hmm.
And then he just goes ahead and does it. But interesting side of Lung we hadn't seen before.
Yeah. Again, this was another interlude where I kind of wondered where are we going? Oh, Lung and Bakuda are here. Okay. Oh, so we're gonna see what life is like on the inside of the bird cage. So at first I was kind of wondering what it was all about, but as it went on, I was like, oh, this was actually a pretty good little interlude. I ended up liking this one a lot.
I did too. I thought it might be another planning session or something that was going to happen, and how to somehow try to, maybe there'd be a way to escape, or maybe Bakuda would have some ideas, but she just burned too many bridges, and that was it for their relationship. But I really enjoyed the interlude, definitely.
That's it for Arc 6, Tangle. As we move on to get Andy's overall impressions of this arc, I do want to take a second and inject a comment and a question we got from Megafire 7 once again. So as we're getting ready to go into that section, Andy, and get your overall impressions, let's see what Megafire has to say, and you can include that in your responses. So Megafire says this: it's funny that Taylor's team is figuring out her combat capabilities a lot faster than she is. Because when Bitch passes the ball to her, and I think this is obviously referring back to inside the gallery in their confrontation with Arms Master, when Bitch passes the ball to her, Skitter is just genuinely confused and has no idea what to do at first. But of course, Bitch was entirely correct, and Skitter pulled victory out of the jaws of defeat. Now here's his question. Speaking of Taylor getting more comfortable with what she's doing, how do you think she's been carrying herself as a supervillain? Do you think she's crossed any lines, done anything you think it's going to be hard for her to come back from? Thoughts on his comment and question?
Well, just to harken back to the team figuring out things faster, I'm going to use a sports analogy. There have been plenty of instances in pro football, the NFL, where track stars have been drafted for their speed. They may have played a little bit of football at times, but not really, just dabbled in it.
Mm-hmm.
But the coaching staff and the team, because they've been in that environment the whole time, will immediately recognize what a difference maker the new player's speed is. And they will know different ways it can be utilized that probably would never occur to the track star.
Yeah.
So instead of just running down the field as fast as you can, and we'll throw the ball as far as we can, we're going to do a jet sweep. We're going to do a reverse.
Sure.
We're going to throw it to you. You hand it back, or, a flea flicker type thing. So I think that's what we're seeing here. So in that perspective, it makes sense. Taylor's that track star. She kind of knows something, but these folks have been a team for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And they're recognizing that she thinks well on her feet. She's getting greater control of her insects, and they're used to trying to think of how can we leverage each other's abilities to make the team stronger. And they're just now, including her in the mix. So it's kind of new to her, a little bit old hat to them. So that's my take on that.
And what about your overall impressions of the arc?
Well, just to touch on the other questions about has Taylor crossed any lines that she can't come back from? That's a tough one because I'm still creeped out by her cutting out Long's eyes at one point. That's very logical, totally makes sense, but she seemed so kind of cold-blooded doing it.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's really come back and said that she's had any flashbacks about it or anything. So it's possible she's crossed some lines. I'm still holding out hope that she can be that, all right, this has gone too far. I'm going to be a hero instead. I've got to turn y'all in. I'm sorry, but that's how it's got to be kind of thing.
Okay.
But I could maybe see her being like Circus, like a rogue, somebody who does things and helps out, but just is not willing to be, has seen both sides of the coin and it realizes that neither one is perfect. Each has its flaws. So I don't know that's much of an answer. That was kind of a political answer, I think. But, it is what it is.
Okay.
My overall impressions of the arc, this was the best one so far. Everything from soup to nuts. You've got character development, you've got huge drama, you've got epic battles, you've got victory snatched from the jaws of defeat. So it was a real winner of an arc. I really enjoyed it a lot.
Same here. And as I told you before, it gets better. This story just continues to get better, arc to arc. All right. So now let's talk about Andy's key character for the arc. Whether hero or villain, cape or civilian, Andy will identify the character that stood out to him, whether it's for good or ill. Andy, who's your selection this week and why?
Well, I'm a little scared at you saying that each one is going to get better because the struggle I had in this one was, we were doing a split on the podcast. And so I stopped after chapter 6.
Yeah.
And I had my key character in mind. And then 7, 8, and 9 came along and I was like, well, now I don't know what, but I think I'm going to stick with that first one. I'm worried I'm going to run into this conundrum going forward, but I got to say Brutus is my key character.
Really?
Yeah. There was the scene at the beginning where Gru was able to grab Brutus's tail to keep from sliding off the roof. And then time and time again, the dogs came through. I think it was Brutus that came barreling out of nowhere when Gru dispelled the darkness and took out the lion-headed protectorate guy. I can't remember that character's name.
Oh, that was Triumph, where he barreled into him.
Right.
Knocked him down. Yes, I believe that was Triumph.
And then when Armsmaster was about to kind of get the upper hand out of the patio, Brutus bumped him enough to throw him off kilter, and that allowed things to go the Undersider's way. So he's the key character for me. He was always in the right place at the right time, it seemed like.
Wow. Well, that's wholly unexpected and very cool. So Brutus, folks, he is our selection for Andy's selection for key character of the arc. And with that, folks, that's all we have for this episode. Thanks again for joining us as we move along with our little project. Let me tell you, Andy and I are having a lot of fun, and we hope you are too. So thanks for joining us. And until next time, take care.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for your comments. Keep them coming. We really enjoy how they spark our imagination in different directions we hadn't thought about. And as Keith said, take care until next time.
Thanks for joining us in this video. We hope you'll like, comment, and subscribe. If not, thanks for stopping by anyway, and we hope you'll return. Music is by the band YYNOT from their self-titled debut CD. You can find more information in the link down below. Catch you later.